think that is a very encouraging thing that you've told us, and hopefully that will continue. So, so then I'll ask Mr. Mitra to continue.
Thank you.
Wonderful.
Thank you, Namita, and thanks to the organizers for calling us here. I'm from the ivory tower, and complete contrast to Ambrish, because he spent his whole life working in the tribal districts of Gujarat, and I've spent last 20 years in Delhi. But what interested me in this whole exercise were two kinds, and which is what I'm going to share, because he didn't say much about his singular achievement in implementing FRA in Gujarat at least, and now we are trying to replicate the same in other states. At least trying to introduce the same ideas. And I think the issue for me was that India had a constitutional right to property as a fundamental right at the start in 1950. We went on diluting it right from the start with the First Amendment to the Constitution in 1951, which was the 9th schedule, to 1978, when it was deleted. The right to property was deleted from fundamental right, 19(1)(f). From that day to today, what we have witnessed is a counter-revolution of some kind. That is the protest against the dams, the protest against the SEZs, the Singur Nandigram episodes. What they actually was highlighting was the dilution of the right to property greatly expanded the abuse of eminent domain. And a critical mass was forming of people from the grassroots who no longer were willing to accept the acquisition by the state for whatever purpose. The Forest Rights Act, in my view, which came after Ambrish and others were on the campaign for at least 5-7 years, since 2000, I know, as a part of that campaign, when, to my view, the first legislation since 1978, which is seeking to recognize right to property and land. To me, it's a historic legislation of that kind, and which is why I got interested, because even as a student, I was very much interested in the constitutionality of right to property and the relationship between liberty and democracy. But I didn't think that the reversal would start in such a dramatic manner. So the significance of the Forest Rights Act are kind of, that is, this act empowers the Gram Sabha, not the Panchayat. Because the Panchayat is a larger body, the Gram Sabha is the more smaller unit directly affected in a particular area. And the Gram Sabha is empowered to do things which they can actually do. That is, this is not an act that subsidizes the Gram Sabhas or the villages with anything from somewhere else. This is an act which the Gram Sabhas themselves can try and implement. And to me, this whole process is a significant illustration of how democracy is deepening in this country to the remotest corners. And this is where my first thing would be, since Ambrish didn't mention it, the basic features of the Forest Rights Act. But in order to enable the Gram Sabha to actually try and have this law implemented, what Ambrish and Archpaini did was to figure out a very transparent, participative way by which people themselves could get their claims. Because there is a particular clause or a feature of the Act, which is the rights, both individual and community, would be recognized as of December 2005. That is, you would have to be able to show that you were cultivating the piece of land as of December 2005. Now, since these are mostly forest areas and since there had been no land settlement, how would one prove that they were actually cultivating? That's where the modern technologies came to the aid of some of the poorest Indians. Google Earth, I'm sure most of you are aware, had become available, but what the additional aspect that came to Google Earth around that time, or 2008-9, was the archival maps. So for the first time, we could see the maps or the satellite images of the area as of, say, 2003 or 2004 or 2006, around the 2005 cutoff that we were looking for and the law requires. And that's when Ambrish figured that we could use simple GPS instruments. Most of you with smartphones have GPS. I had a smartphone. I didn't even know for 6 years that my phone had a GPS. So we were that ignorant. But you could use a simple GPS, plot each boundary. I'll do it. Plot each boundary, get it endorsed and approved by the Gram Sabhas. This is the status as of May 2013. As Ambrish said, the story is not just with Gujarat that they rejected 130,000. The story has been pretty much the same in much of India. In fact, 10-11% is the rate of approval that we have witnessed. And this was my first interaction, I think, in 2009 and 10 when I went to one of the villages in Gujarat with Ambrish and Arch Vahine. And I was amazed that people could read, not read in the literal sense of reading a book, but could read a satellite image of their area and so quickly identify the plots themselves. They know their area as the back of your palm. They had never flown above. They had no idea what a satellite image was. But once they saw it and oriented it, the north, south, etc., they could identify plot by plot. Secondly, because at least quite a few of them were used to mobile phones, the GPS instrument didn't come as something foreign to them. That they could handle a GPS just like they handle a mobile phone. Together with these, Ambrish had this revolution, in my view, an unbelievable revolution, because what has happened in the last 3-4 years is more than 200 villages, 50,000 plots have been documented on the web platform that we have built, but that it was not done by him or his friends themselves. That in every village, it was the forest rights committees, which were formed under the Forest Rights Act by the Gram Sabha, that took the initiative. Ambrish and us, we helped in acquiring the GPS, trained these villages, and they went out to the field, made documentation of the plots, wrote down the names of the claimants, and have it approved by the Gram Sabha. The whole attempt was that it doesn't matter what the state might say or do. If people can do it, we should try and enable them to do it. So this is how, if you come to our website, righttoproperty.org, you will find we plotted it. This is a Google map where you can select the villages. Since I'm not online, I'm just showing it on the slides. This is how you see the summary with the names of the claimants, the husband and wife, the area and the location, etc. We kind of generate reports of this kind for each individual plots, which can be given to the claimants and to the Gram Sabha for processing. Kind of reports that is generated for the Gram Sabha to be submitted to they have to submit it to the sub-district level committee under the FRA, and then it can go on appeal to the district level committee for the final approval and disposal. 50,000 plots, I can't believe it. I really can't believe it, having seen it almost from the start, that so much has been possible in such a small time. And what is amazing is that while their initial activities were restricted to 1 or 2 districts in the Narmada area, they are now getting invitations from almost 5 or 10 districts of Gujarat, where the tribal populations are significant, where people have heard just by word of mouth. This exercise is taking place completely driven by demand. We are not a grant-giving organization, we have no money. The whole exercise has been taken up by the people themselves, bearing the cost of printing the kind of maps that you see, because they understand the value of the property that they are seeking, both as individual titles as well as communal titles. These were the kind of workshops far from the IIC venues that we have been organizing for the last 1.5 years, trying to get, and the impact. Just last Sunday, I had a glimpse of something that I had thought of in theory, but I could never, I had no idea that I'm going to hear it from the people themselves. Last Sunday, Amrish and I and some other friends, we were in a village in Gujarat in the Dediapada taluk of Narmada district, Sagai. There were 200 people, mostly people who have been actively involved with the FRC, who were there. Apart from what Amrish said, that they are interested in investing further in irrigation, in bunding the areas, in protecting the forest. To me, what brought tears to my eyes were one guy stood up and said that now when he visits a taluk office or a district office, he is treated with respect, and added that at times he's even offered a glass of water. That is the other India that we have to be really aware of, that these were people who were treated worse than animals. This is an empowerment tool in addition to the title. The title will take time to come, and in many cases, in fact, we saw improvement when Amrish and all started with this whole exercise. Gujarat had a 11% approval rate in Narmada, and the district officials were happy that that was the highest in Gujarat. Today, it is 40 to 50%. Because of the technology that has been brought in. Because this is, and we saw it just a few months ago, a collector from Andhra Pradesh invited us. And once we demonstrated the capacity that the satellite images can do, the collector, the administrative side, as well as the forest department who were all present there, agreed that this could be a very powerful way to resolve the kind of perpetual conflict that the forest department and the local communities have had for the last 60 years. Because the evidence is so categorical, particularly for agricultural land. And if we were online, we could have shown it to you. And this is the scope. You do? Yeah, but okay, if you can do it, so this is what I've already told you about, and this is kind of my theory why I got interested. In 25 years of being engaged in public policy issues and debates of various kinds, this is the second time I'm witnessing or have the privilege of being part of an exercise where we are not dependent on anybody to exercise our rights. Right to information comes closest to it in the sense that you have the law, you can try and implement it, all of us can. Exactly in this case. That village after village are coming forward. Now we have had requests from people whom we had no idea, or they had no idea of us, we had no idea of them in the last few years. I mean, particularly in the last 1 year, from Orissa to Gujarat, that why not try and adopt it to see in their areas that how it can happen. And to me, this aspect or this relationship is critical, it's fundamental. That it is demand-driven precisely because people at that level might be illiterate, might be poor, but they have a complete understanding, much more than any one of us, as to what is the real value of the property that they possess. Because most of us in this room don't depend on land as for our livelihood. We have no idea how people at that level need and value and cherish the land for agriculture and the common areas that will go around it. And to me, there has been no other example of a grassroots initiative to implement a right rather than waiting for the state to come forward and implement it, because the state has no capacity. We are talking of 25 to 40 million pieces of plots. There's no state in India which can map that scale. And this has been, to me, throughout history. Citizenship came up through ownership of property. And some of the poorest citizens of India in remotest corners are for the first time in their lives are beginning to feel as citizens of this country. And this has been part of the same, it's taken us 60 years, but some other countries took 200 years. So perhaps we have something to be proud of. And there's a whole lot of land-related laws that are now on the anvil. But let me just end with something that I think we should aim for and which would come. Because I heard in the morning that the Meghalaya has the right to the minerals under the ground. The Forest Rights Act does not give that. Fifth schedule probably gives right to the minor minerals in the tribal areas. But what the first stage is, like the conversion of the forest villages into revenue villages, so that the regular services, water, education, irrigation, health can come more freely. Then the transfer, lease, sale to capitalize. I cannot believe that 40 million tribals who can now claim ownership potentially would demand to accept a claim at a title which cannot have any capitalization value because it cannot be put on the mortgage market. The capitalization value is what made most of us leave what our ancestors did once upon a time, that is agriculture. So the capitalization is critical for real valuation of the asset that they are getting. And right to minerals underground, under whatever is under the soil. Right to manage the forest. The community forest is already there, but it could also be extended to wildlife. It's only our lack of imagination, because there are plenty of examples around the world where the forest and the wildlife are managed by the communities themselves and share the benefit that comes from a high-value asset such as wildlife. So the whole, the future possibilities based on this act is enormous, because it's sensitizing and mobilizing a population that had hardly any voice. And finally, the recent two judgments, the Supreme Court on the Vedanta, underscored FRA, the Forest Rights Act. The Forest Rights Act goes community by community, and I think the kind of balance that Mr. Verghese was mentioning in the morning is probably possible if not community as a collective, but community who's actually a community in a particular area are recognized as having the capacity to decide whether to accept a particular mining project or any project for that matter or not. If they do, it's their right. If they don't, it's their right. And that is a transformation that I think that got crystallized in the Singur episode. That what was being claimed was not a compensation. What was being claimed was whether owners really have the right over their property. And the question now is, can the FRA potentially be extended and expanded, not just to empower the communities, not just on the land, but anything that is underneath, or anything, or the timber and the bamboo that grows over it. Because Ambrish and all, 20 years ago, I think, his colleague Trupti had this campaign on bamboo, which the forest department was selling at 1 rupee per bamboo to a paper mill. Today, the villages can sell it at 80 rupees. It's a transformation. And displacement has become a thing of the past in most part of tribal Gujarat. Because this guy who told me that he's offered a glass of water also said that today, for the forest department to really come in to remove people because they are encroachers is socially and politically almost impossible. Change is taking place. The question is whether we will recognize what is changing and therefore be able to leverage it for the better or not. Thank you very much for the time. Thanks.